New Mexico's incoming House of Representatives will be mostly women, and the new president pro tem of the state Senate is Mimi Stewart, who replaces Mary Kay Papen, as a matter of fact. And on the national stage, Republican women showed strong gains among their party in the U.S. House, and President Joe Biden has nominated Janet Yellen for Secretary of the Treasury and appointed an all-female communications staff. Pretty cool there. Dave, step in on any of that, but we'd love to hear what you think is behind the rise, particularly of Republican women. Let's start there.
Well, I was really looking at those numbers, and I'm thinking, when you look at the idea of a Republican women. Now, this is an opinion, and here it comes. I think that Republican women, in some ways, the reason they did so well in gaining all those seats in the House of Representatives, Republicans do not automatically say, you're a woman, we're going to have you run. In some ways, they make you fight for it, and they're kind of harsh. And, I think that, Republicans have said, they don't automatically just say, well, you're a woman, run for this seat. Women have had to fight for it to get there with Republicans. And I think, in a way, it's like muscle. It had to be built up, and it built up, and somehow it broke. The question is a Republican woman a good candidate? Is she going to be a good politician? We're going to find out. I mean, there's no question. But I thought it was really fascinating that Republican women were the number one beneficiary of whatever it was that happened to the electorate in this election.
Right. It is fascinating. We'll have to circle back on that in future times and talk and kind of tease that out.
Yes.
Sophie, interestingly, and let's bring it closer to home, the numbers for New Mexico, it's the House, it's really kind of startling when you think about it. The kind of advantage that women, it's wonderful.
Women are in the majority in the House. We already had the past president pro tem of the Senate was a woman, Mary Kay Papen, and now we will have a woman in that leadership role again. But I think that part of the picture in terms of women in politics in New Mexico can really be ascribed to groups like Emerge New Mexico, who have made a concerted effort, brought funding and expertise into bear to help women develop their candidacies, to develop the skills they need to successfully run. And we also have a history of female political leadership in this state.
That's right.
And I think that this there's kind of an old saw about how you need to see someone who looks like you in that position in order to think I can have that position. And I think my hope is that we've reached the tipping point there.
Interesting point. Tom, you know Mimi Stewart well. You've worked with her. You've known her a long. Senate Pro Tem is no small thing, and she's really earned it when you really think about it. What's your prediction about the coattail effect, perhaps, with her ascension?
Well, I think it's great. Obviously, the vote will need to still be made.
That's true. Good
before
point
the
there.
legislative session occurs and stuff. But definitely, she has the trust and the faith of the Democratic caucus, and she's a very she has worked for the position, and she has done a fantastic job to secure the position because she has the respect of her colleagues. And I think, when we look at respect in general, I think that's really will determine, how your gender plays into your role in leadership is what kind of respect do you show to others. And so I think Mimi is going to do great. I think if she's elected, which I think she will be, I'm not trying to say that she's not, but when you look at just the prominence of the female women candidates and the entire New Mexico congressional delegation is
right.
all female.
That's
and
right.
so that's fantastic. So, it's not what I'd like to see is that this all of a sudden doesn't become a trend and we focus more on, hey, this is great. We're all just voting for candidates now. Because there's a lot of fantastic, strong women who are in leadership positions, and I think we're going to benefit as a result.
So,
Can I jump in on that?
Please,
Oh,
yeah, I wanted to get to you right out there. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out too, though, that there's been a shift. The shift that we see in Washington definitely goes beyond this communications team. I mean, I've got to say, no slight to the women on this team and to women in public relations. I worked in communications for many years, but public relations and communications have been seen traditionally as female jobs. There's even a,
Yes.
sort of an old, it's called the pink ghetto of public relations, where it's often dominated by women. But what I think is more telling about the Biden administration and the decisions that it's making, 53% of their senior transition staff are women. And that comes very close to reflecting the percentage of women in our population overall. 52% of all of that transition team, all that transition staff is women. More than half of the government agency review team is women. And we have women moving into, or at least, that'll be nominated for really important positions in national security with ambassadorships. At the Treasury, Janet Yellen is expected, to take on that role, and other senior roles in the White House. And when we look at other countries, and we see that there are some countries that say, half of our legislators have to be women, or half of our board members, corporate board members, have to be women. Well, the U.S. hasn't done that. But here we have an administration that is really, I think, putting teeth behind its allyship and showing, we can put 53% of women on this team. Why wouldn't we?
Good point there. Dave, is there something that you have seen that there is a key to recruiting women for office that both parties have started to use? It's a little early days, but is there something you're grokking that seems to be the trend?
I think, I sort of am pretty clear about how I feel about this. I believe the best politician tends to win the slot, and the question that I keep thinking is, are these women going to change the institutions that they've been elected to or appointed to, or are the institutions going to change these women? And we're going to find out. But I think New Mexico has a very long history of, you stand up and run and, you can win. I mean, Stephanie Garcia Richards. But I also think we need to credit people like, Mrs. Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi. She has been a great politician. The fact that she's a woman, I'm guessing, has had some impact, yet she's been effective, male or female, no matter how you look at it. And I kept thinking too about Geraldine Ferraro when she ran for vice president in 1984. That was a real trailblazer. And all of this has had an impact. And people like Shirley Chisholm and Barbara Jordan, I mean, these women did it when no one was doing it. And, and so you really have to go back and give them some credit too, that they were willing to take a lot of abuse, really was what it came down to stand up and run. And they did it. And, but I think that Sophie's point about emerge, I mean, nothing, it can't hurt, right? When you say to women, like, let's, get up and run. And I think we should be doing the same thing for a lot of Hispanic potential candidates and Black politicians. Nobody can stand up and say, I'm a politician, I'm going to run for office. There's a lot of gears to keep it going, to get a logo, to start a campaign, to start fundraising. And, all of these are learnable skills, but you have to have someone that's willing to teach them to you.
That's a good point there. Tom, interestingly, when you think about it, it's this entire rainbow of how women see the world, to put it frankly. Just like men, that once an assumed office is held, there's the possibility to have that woman's lived experience come through in her policy decisions and how she, the approaches a woman wants to take on the things that are important to her. And Sophie, of course, I want you to pick up on this as well, but starting with Tom, could we anticipate that policy changes and how things are approached could have a serious change here when these numbers start to turn like this?
Oh, absolutely. Because what happens is when you have shifts, to Dave's point, as far as if it's an ethnic or a gender representation, you're going to have a shift in perspective, and that's going to impact the kind of legislation that's brought to the table, and it brings an opportunity for things that might not have been given some serious consideration because you have a new perspective. So I think that-that's the value that we have for New Mexico's and as well as for our country is whenever we increase the number of perspectives, I think that we increase the ability to have government literally represent more people.
Good point there. Sophie, your thought on that?
Hard to argue with that. I mean, I think that Tom makes an excellent point that the increase in diversity is going to lead to an increase in perspectives, obviously, in our government. In the more immediate term, though, the two dynamics that come together is the Democratic political power in this state, the fact that Mary Kay Papen is no longer in office, and the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think one bill that got held up last year, that has been held up in the past, that is, I think, almost guaranteed to pass at this point, would be the repeal of New Mexico's anti-abortion statute, because there, you can no longer say, oh well, Roe v. Wade holds back that tide, and you have both a political party and, representing that political party, a group of people who either are or have been impacted by those policies, the nationwide and attempts to limit abortion rights.
Sure.
And so, I think that's one big area that you're going to see. But the Democrats have also brought up issues involving early childhood education again. There's hope that issue will be able to move forward. And I expect, if nothing else, an awful lot of coverage about what are the ladies doing now? Is this a ladies' issue?
Yes.
And to the extent that it's good government, oh my goodness, you go.
Interesting point there. That's right. Hey, Dave, when you think about it, though, a 37 to 33 female to male advantage in our legislative House side, that's a block, as they say. You know, you can move a lot of things forward with that kind of advantage.
Right. But I think we have to let's not lose our perspective here. The number one issue that this legislative body is going to be facing is the crisis in the economy. And, that isn't male or female. And really, we are facing a disaster in terms of who's going to get money? Where are they going to get it? How are we going to prevent these evictions? I'm not sure that's a male-female divide. That's a divide of the people who have money versus the people who don't have money.
But Dave, there is a male-female divide that has been noted, and it's an economic divide where women at a much higher rate are having to drop out of the workforce to take care of children.
But and also, we can look and we can see, will these women say, women are traditionally still underpaid. I think it's now 73 cents on the dollar. So if we can move those things to the forefront, I think that benefits everyone. There's no question that we need to do it. But the number one issue that's going to be facing this legislature, male, female, in between, is going to be, how are we going to salvage this economy and make sure that we don't have a wave of evictions and we have people going broke, because that's going to be the number one thing. And if women are better at that, then good, because boy, we need it. There's no question about it.
Good thoughts from everyone there. We're taking a quick break, and then we're back talking good news about the economy.